I want to thank my mom. She brought me here. She's sitting out there. It is Arroh back at you again with another video.
Arroh going up against the ultimate showdown champion.
Wow. Your success of winning, going 8-0, the only undefeated person at this tournament.
And again, going 8-0, going 5-0, beating Housestark, beating John Formack, and then going 3-1 against one of the best players in the entire world.
One shot, now the future is yours. Go! Yeah, I was building on a lecture. Verses coming daily under pressure.
Hey guys, it is Arrow on Twitter, known as The Arrow. YouTube also is going to be The Arrow with 2 H's. And this is going to be my little review over my regionals team that I ended up using during my 8-0 tournament. And it has been common knowledge that it is triple water, triple flyer. I have yet to do a video or anything about why I decided to use this lineup, so y'all will be seeing this for the first time here on Go Stadium. So, to start it off, let's start off with Lantern, and I was running the Water Gun Thunderbolt Hydro Pump Lantern. This pick was made the night before of my tournament. I was between Lantern and Sableye on this last spot, and ultimately I chose Lantern because I just needed that extra Bastiodon coverage, extra tank coverage, and Water Gun Lantern does that job really well. So this Lantern I actually caught at 4:30 a.m. in the morning on the day of, and as you can see, it is a pretty decent PvP IV spread. I had a different Lantern that was not so hot. It ends up ranking number 32, and pretty much Lantern was picked because of the ability to cover Bastiodon, Azumarill, and Skarmory. And moving on to the second Pokemon, we have Azumarill. And I ran a kind of weird matchup on Azumarill. I ran Bubble, Hydro Pump, Ice Beam. And I have Housestark to thank for this matchup because I was messaging him one day during my class, and he was like, I ran Hydro Pump, Ice Beam. I was like, dang, I thought you needed Play Rough. And he was like, you only lose the mirror, really, and the matchup with Lantern. Even worse. And I was like, well, I think I have good Azumarill coverage, and I'm liking the fact that I can beat the tanks and still do damage with grass types, because I really love the fact that Azumarill can hurt the grass types. So ended up going Bubble, Hydro Pump, and Ice Beam. It's a decent PvP IV Pokemon. It could be better, but Azumarill was very common in my lineups. I ran it a lot. Probably the water type that I ran the most. And we move on to Swampert. And this boy is a rank 1 Swampert for PvP, so I'm really happy about that one. Swampert was a beast. It can run through teams as long as it doesn't run into grass. And I loved how spammy it was. I didn't use it very much during these battles, but the times I did use it, it came in very crucial. I ended up running Mudshot, Hydro Cannon, and Sludge Wave. Sludge Wave was very helpful to, I believe I hit an Azumarill with it one time, and it just added that extra grass coverage that Swampert really didn't have. Moving on to the next Pokemon, those are the 3 waters that I decided to run, and we have our shiny boy, Altaria. Okay, the reason I ran Altaria was I did a battle with ValorAsh, and he kicked my butt with it, and I was like, well, I love Skarmory too much to get rid of him, so why not run Altaria too? So I did that, because Rage and Taz had success with it at the championships, and Altaria just, it covers so much. It loses hard to Azumarill, but it ends up beating Lantern and Swampert was a huge addition to the meta. So on Altaria, it's pretty straightforward. It's going to be Dragon Breath, Sky Attack, and Dragon Pulse. And I need to fix this Altaria. I need to go get a better one. But, I mean, shinies do more damage, right? So, on to the next bird, and that will be the beautiful, beautiful Skarmory. There it is. Oh, man, I love this thing. We're running the standard Air Slash Sky Attack Flash Cannon. Skarmory, I feel like, is the better bird overall, because it beats Altaria. It still walls everything Altaria walls. It has decent strategy against Medicham. And ultimately, it's able to hurt the tanks more with that Flash Cannon. And on to the last addition to the team, we have Razor Leaf Tropius. Not Air Slash, Razor Leaf. And I made that switch the night before the tournament. I was getting my butt kicked by Azumarill, eating Ice Beam after Ice Beam with this Tropius. Because Azumarill actually beats Air Slash Tropius in the 2-2 shield scenario. And Tropius with Razor Leaf, it just runs through Swampert, it runs through Lantern, it runs through any water type. It also still holds up the matchup with Medicham. You end up losing to the Air Slash variant, and you end up losing to Venusaur. But it's just a solid Pokemon. Tropius was a great lead for me, because people are scared to lead their Skarmory, because you don't want to lose your Skarmory when you need it later on. So, that is the team. With this lineup, I was very hoping that people were afraid to bring grass, while also I was hoping they thought they needed to bring grass, because I'm running 3 flyers to counter the grass, and I'm running 3 waters to get beat by the grass. So this was an ultimate bait lineup, and however I felt like I was reading the opponent's lineup, I was going to adjust accordingly to what I ran. And you'll see in these battles that I run a lot of weird lineups. I didn't run the same lineup. My favorite lineup to run is always going to be Lantern, Azumarill, and Skarmory. And you'll see why whenever you get led in with grass, and it's rare, you switch Lantern out into Azumarill. That's all I'm going to say. Thank y'all, and on to the rest of the video.
In game 1, we have double flying strategy, Altaria leading into Venusaur. So this is a positive matchup. Arrohh pulls up his switch screen, anticipating our opponent's going to switch here, but our opponent decides to stay in with the Venusaur, and it's able to get off this Sludge Bomb. It's not going to be very effective. It does take out a decent chunk, and Altaria is able to get off a Sky Attack, so our opponent decides to shield because it was going to be super effective damage. So out comes Charizard, and Arrohh decides to swap out the Altaria, although the Altaria is a positive matchup against this Charizard, so he wants to save that for the Venusaur. Out comes Swampert, getting off these Hydro Cannons super quick, and Charizard is going to shield at least one of these Hydro Cannons. So it does go for this charge move here, and as Dragon Claw, it's going to be finished off with this next Hydro Cannon. So our opponent tried to shield bait there, but unfortunately Arrohh didn't go for that shield bait. So out comes Venusaur, is just farming up the Swampert, but Swampert is charging up that move so quickly, it's able to get off one more Hydro Cannon, and out comes Skarmory. Venusaur does spam his last charge move before it dies. Unfortunately, Skarmory's just not going to take very effective damage from this Frenzy Plant. Out comes a Medicham, and without any shields, this Medicham is going to go down just with one Sky Attack. It does get off this Power Up Punch, neutral damage, but this Sky Attack, unfortunately, is going to take out this Medicham to a very smidgen of health, where Skarmory is able to finish it off. So GG round 1, very well predicted there. So game 2, starting off, we have Azumarill into Melmetal. So this is actually a positive matchup for our opponent. Good prediction on their end. Azumarill is going to take super effective damage from these Thunderbolts, but it is a very, very tanky Pokemon. It is one of the best tanks in Great League, and here Arrohh tries to shield bait. Does our opponent decide to shield here? And he does, because Hydro Pump is able to finish off Melmetal in just one hit. So Melmetal is able to get off this Thunderbolt here, and Arrohh goes for the Ice Beam. So he was trying to squeeze in that Ice Beam before the opponent gets off the Thunderbolt. So unfortunately our opponent probably countered the bubbles there and realized it was an Ice Beam, so it wasn't very effective damage. So out comes Venusaur, but switching a little bit too slow there. Melmetal was almost down to nothing. So Venusaur comes out. It's not very good for Lantern here, because Lantern is going to go take super effective damage here, and out comes Skarmory to finish off this Venusaur. Unfortunately, this Venusaur is locked in, and it's just going to get farmed up by the Skarmory. So although Arrohh was losing the lead, he was able to lock in that Venusaur, sacrificing that Lantern here at double water, and the Skarmory is able to farm up a bit of energy, and out comes Azumarill, and here comes Charizard's charge move. It's going to be a Blast Burn, so Azumarill decides to shield. It's going to be able to get off this Ice Beam, and this Ice Beam should almost KO this Charizard. Yep, takes it out to a smidgen of health, and out comes Melmetal with very little health because of that Lantern Water Gun. Another double flying line, we have Tropius starting off against Lantern, so super effective damage with the Razor Leaf. It's going to delete it, so our opponent decides to swap out the Lantern. Out comes Tropius. Unfortunate for our opponent here, we do have a counter swap into Skarmory. Skarmory is going to be able to take everything from this Tropius. It is a Razor Leaf Tropius, so it's going to be able to just farm it down, but Arrohh decides to just use the Sky Attack, is not going to play around, and is going to try and save some health for the Skarmory. And out comes Lantern. It's going to be able to tank these Sky Attacks very well, as it's not very effective. Lantern's going to be able to just farm it down with this Water Gun. Skarmory is able to get off a second Sky Attack, but it's not going to be too much damage. Our opponent decides to shield here. Perhaps our opponent wants to conserve the energy of the Lantern. It decides to go for the Thunderbolt. Very interesting play. And out comes Tropius, and unfortunate for Lantern, doesn't have any charge move at all, and it's just going to go down really quickly. And so Azumarill comes out, and because it's Tropius with Razor Leaf, it's going to be an uphill battle, as Arrohh still have 2 shields remaining. So this is very well played on Arrow's end, and good prediction. He's able to just really dominate this matchup with the Tropius when our opponent decides to bring 2 water, Lantern and Azumarill. So coming into round 2 of game 2, Azumarill against Skarmory. So this is a very slightly neutral matchup, but in favor of a nice beam Hydro Pump Azumarill, because both those moves do a decent amount of damage against Skarmory. Skarmory is able to get off the Sky Attack, neutral damage, doing a decent chunk. So Arrohh, no shield bait here, straight for the Hydro Pump. Will it land? It does land. It does a huge amount of damage, and opponents gets off 4 air slash, 5th air slash, 6th air slash. Very interesting. I think our opponent was going for the Flash Cannon, but perhaps it was a mistake, because now the Azumarill has a ton of health, or potentially it was our opponent wanting to just farm down this Azumarill using the Tropius. So coming in with Skarmory, and our opponent decides to counter switch into Medicham. Not exactly counter switch, but is still better than the Tropius. So Arrohh has his Tropius in the back, comes out against Medicham. Unfortunate for Medicham, it's not going to do very effective damage. Even the Ice Punch is going to be tanked by this Tropius, because it's not powered up enough. So this Ice Punch, Tropius is able to tank it, although it's double weakness against it. Tropius is such a good Pokemon. Medicham is able to get off this power up, but doesn't finish the Tropius, and Tropius comes out. Unfortunate, it's facing the Skarmory, so this is GG round 2. So very well played on Arrow's end. Very good predictions. So coming into game 3, we have the double water strategy. So we've got the Lantern leading into an Azumarill. Very well prediction on Arrow's end. He's able to go for this matchup where he has a huge advantage. Out comes Venusaur, but unfortunate for Venusaur, it will be farmed by the Skarmory. It's going to be able to take any hits that is coming. The Frenzy Plant is not very effective, unfortunately. And does Arroh decide to just farm it down? It looks like he will be just farming down this Venusaur. So, but by farming it down, what I mean is it's able to just use Air Slash, and now this Skarmory has got 2 Sky Attacks, but it decides to go for a Flash Cannon, knowing that the Azumarill is coming out. Very well prediction from our opponent's end. He decides to shield the Flash Cannon, but this Skarmory is able to get 1 more Sky Attack, and it's going to take this charge move. So Skarmory has done its job. It's able to take down that Venusaur, take down 1 shield from the Azumarill, and very, very well timed switch here. So Lantern swapping into Azumarill, tanking that Ice Beam like a boss. So it's a mirror match. It is in the favor of our opponent. No, sorry. So this is an Ice Beam versus Ice Beam Azumarill. So very interesting. No play rough on both ends. Both Ice Beam and Hydro Pump is not very effective. But now Arrow has a ton of energy by using that Ice Beam there instead of Hydro Pump. So out comes Wigglytuff. It's going to be very hard for Wigglytuff to come back. Although Charm is doing a ton of damage, it's not going to be able to get off a charge move because Arrow still have shields up. So out comes Lantern. It's already got a Thunderbolt charged up, and it's going to finish off this Wigglytuff. GG. So coming into round 2, we have our starting lead of Swampert into Medicham. So this is favorable for our opponents. So going to be interesting how this plays out and whether or not Arrow is going to swap out. So it does decide to put up a bit of shield pressure here and goes off for the Hydro Cannon. This first power up punch is not going to do too much damage, but Arrow decides to counter swap straight away into Azumarill. Out comes Probopass. This is a still iffy matchup. If it's able to land this shield bait with the Ice Beam, this Probopass might lose. So very ballsy here. Our opponent decides not to shield, and this Thunderbolt is going to be super effective. But Azumarill still has a bit of shield pressure here. Depending if our opponent countered correctly, he might choose to shield. He does shield, so very well played on Arrow's end, and he decides to let go of the Azumarill here, and knowing that this Swampert is going to do a ton of damage against the Probopass, it decides to shield this next move, which is the Rock Slide, which is fine. So Arrow still has 1 shield, farmed a ton of energy on this Probopass, and goes off for this Hydro Cannon, finishes it off, but has a second Hydro Cannon ready to go. But knowing that it's Azumarill that comes out, he goes for the Sludge Wave. Does our opponent decide to shield? No, it doesn't. Almost takes out 70% off this Azumarill, and this Hydro Cannon is very likely close to finishing off this Azumarill, but Azumarill decides to shield here. So he didn't want to let this Azumarill farm any more energy, decides to swap out into Skarmory and eats this Hydro Pump, but it's able to farm a bit of energy, so he decides to just farm down this Azumarill and decides to shield against that Ice Beam instead. So out comes Medicham. Unfortunately for our opponent here, he does not have any shield, and that's pretty much GG. So very well played on Arrow's end. Coming into game 4, we have Medicham against Tropius. So Tropius is a positive matchup. So again, Arrow has a good prediction on the lead here. Slightly positive matchup against Medicham. Medicham decides to go for the power up punch, I assume, and it makes sense for Tropius not to shield there, as it's not very effective, and power up punch is not that scary in the beginning. So it does get off the Sleep Blade. Our opponent decides to shield here. Very likely this Ice punch is going to be coming up. And so far, all 4 games, I believe Arrohh is able to predict the lead, but he has shown his skill by winning the games where he lost the lead as well. And so here this ice punch is blocked. Arrohh decides to double shield here. Very interesting. Out comes Skarmory, and Skarmory is facing Skarmory. So it looks like our opponent does not have any counter for Skarmory. It decides to stay in with the Skarmory, but it does have a slight energy advantage, and Arrohh does not have any shield. So it goes for the Sky Attack. Unfortunately, it's not going to be very effective. So opponent decides to swap out to Azumarill. Not exactly a counter, however, because Skarmory has no shields, it's going to be able to just take these moves. It has to take these moves. So the Sky Attack gets off neutral damage, and Azumarill is able to probably just farm down the Skarmory. So opponent farmed a bit of energy there, so he decides not to go for the second Ice Beam. Was trying to farm down the Skarmory, but Arrohh is recognizing that he was trying to farm it down, decides to swap into Tropius, forcing it to shield. And so now in this scenario, this Dragon Breath is not doing a whole bunch of damage to Azumarill because it's resisting that Dragon Breath. So it is able to get off one Ice Beam and done a ton of damage to Altaria. And Arrohh, being a good counter there, he was able to just count. Oh my gosh, that is amazing. He is able to get off the Sky Attack because he over farmed a little bit against that Azumarill. It really helped him set up for this victory. Oh no, he does not win here. So wow, I mean, that was very well played. The energy management there was superb, but unfortunate for Arrohh, he loses that game. So coming into game 2, Lantern against Skarmory. Again, a very good prediction on Arrow's end. And this Skarmory is not going to be able to do too much damage. Not much of a threat to Lantern. It's not going to shield here. Gets off a Sky Attack. It's going to be resisted. And Arrohh wastes no time. Goes for the Thunderbolt. It's going to be super effective. Our opponent decides not to shield, just letting go of the Skarmory. Out comes Medicham. It's going to be able to get off this power-up punch super quickly before the Lantern is able to get off the second Thunderbolt. And Lantern goes for the Thunderbolt. Is very likely going to draw a shield from Medicham. I think this Medicham is powering up a whole bunch of energy there. He decides to swap it out, and out comes Azumarill. Knowing that the Lantern is gone, the Azumarill was almost a safe switch. So here we go. What do we have here? We have Play Rough. So this is very advantageous for our opponent here, because Arrohh only has Hydro Pump and Ice Beam, both being resisted. And this Play Rough is going to be able to almost finish off Arrow's Azumarill. Hydro Pump is going to do a decent amount of damage, but not quite there. It's not enough to finish off this Azumarill. So this next Ice Beam is going to put our opponent on red, but opponent decides to go for this Ice Beam to finish Arrow's Azumarill off. It won't have enough energy, unfortunately, so Skarmory is able to farm up a couple of hits, and it's almost there at the Sky Attack. So knowing this is only the second power-up punch, Arrohh decides to shield here, and he goes for the Sky Attack. This is going to be super effective damage. It's going to put a ton of pressure on our opponent. He decides to opt in for a second shield. This power-up punches are just rolling in. It's neutral damage, and it's going to do a bit of damage to Skarmory. So Skarmory is able to get off this next Sky Attack, and it's going to be able to finish off this Medicham. So this Skarmory is GG, won game 2. So coming into game 3, Tropius into Medicham, and Tropius is again positive matchup against Medicham. It's going to be able to just tank whatever comes first. It doesn't matter if it's an Ice Punch or Power-Up Punch. Ice Punch does do a decent amount of damage, but opponent decides to swap out the Medicham into Skarmory, and unfortunate for Arrohh, he did not bring his lantern this time, so his only counter was Skarmory against Skarmory. So I think maybe a bit of lag there. Decide to do a rematch. So far we have witnessed Arrohh do very good energy management, where he's able to farm extra energy when possible, and then utilize that energy later on in the game, coming in to put pressure on our opponent's Pokemon. So again, we are starting with the same matchup, Tropius into Medicham. Medicham is going to go for the Ice Punch, exact same move as last time, decides to swap out to Skarmory. So we're looking at a repeat of what we were seeing before the lag. And this Skarmory does have an energy advantage, is going to get off the Sky Attack. Arrohh is going to go for his own Sky Attack, doing not very effective damage. We're unable to hit all the bubbles, doing just one less. So here Skarmory is able to get off his Sky Attack, not very effective damage. So we're trading Sky Attack. The middle birds are both very tanky, and we're just trading Sky Attacks here. So this allows a bit of time for both sides to formulate a strategy. And here Arrohh decides to shield here. He wants to keep that switch advantage, perhaps. So he goes for the Flash Cannon. If our opponent shields here, he's going to be at a decent amount of... he's going to be ahead. So opponent decides not to shield. So he's able to gain switch advantage, although he had to sacrifice that shield. But he knows he can counter swap using Tropius, countering this Medicham. So this is a tough spot for Tropius. It has to take this move here. Unfortunately, it's not very effective. This Medicham is going to be able to get off one more power-up punch, very likely here, I think. Yep. So not very effective damage. Opponent swaps out into Venusaur. I think this is going to be over. Altaria still has one shield left. If that Medicham used Ice Punch instead, it could have been devastating. But I think Arrohh had some good counting there. Note that it was power-up punch. GG. So coming into game 5, we're starting with the Lantern Skarmory lineup. Again, we're seeing very similar lineups coming from Arrohh. He knows his lineup very well. I know for someone like him to do 8-0, he would have done a ton of practice with those lineup against different lineups, so that he knows these matchup inside out. Again, he has a positive matchup, very well prediction on Arrow's end, leading into Azumarill. So Azumarill decides not to shield, and it's going to be able to get off this next play rough. It's doing neutral damage, so it does a decent chunk. Unfortunate for our opponent here, he's going to be able to, our Arrow's going to be able to get off this Thunderbolt. So Thunderbolt gets shielded. I think this Lantern might be able to get off a second Thunderbolt. So very well played on Arrow's end. He decides to go for the Thunderbolt instead of the Hydro Pump, so he's able to get 2. And it forces both shields from our opponent. And now Skarmory comes out. Although Medichamp's got a ton of energy, this Skarmory is going to put a ton of pressure with the next Sky Attack. It's going to be able to very likely finish off this Medicham. So Medicham goes for Power Up Punch here. Very good swap there, and very good reaction from Arrow's end as well. But I think he probably was tapping furiously, and he kind of just tapped that Sky Attack anyway. But he doesn't have to worry too much here. He's going to be able to get off this Hydro Pump against this Skarmory to finish it off. And then Medicham is not going to do too much damage against this Azumarill. So comes in with Medicham. These power-up punches just not going to do too much. A little bit of lag, but that's okay. It's not going to change the outcome of this match. So power-up not very effective against Fairy. Azumarill, being a tank, is going to get off this Ice Beam and is going to be able to close to finishing off this Medicham. And GG round 1. So coming into round 2, again we have the double flying strategy. So Altaria against Metachamp. And this is a positive matchup for this Flying Dragon here, and Metachamp decides to swap out. It does have a bit of energy saved up that we can remember. So out comes Skarmory. Is going to tank this Sky Attack like it's nothing, obviously not very effective damage. Dragon Breath, although is not very effective, is still doing a very decent chunk, as Altaria is a very high DPS Pokemon. It's able to get off a second Sky Attack. Opponent decides not to shield here. It's going to try and draw a shield here with the Sky Attack of its own. So Arrohh decides to shield here, knowing that he could just finish it off with Dragon Breath. Very well played here, and he's able to get another Sky Attack off. I think that's probably 3 Sky Attacks, so you know that's a decent amount for any Pokemon if it's able to get 3 Charge Attack in one game. And that is amazing. Out comes Swampert. Unfortunately, those Mud Shots are doing nothing, and Altaria is able to force this loud shield from our opponent, and Altaria has done its work. He decides to just let it go, and so out comes Azumarill. Is going to be able to tank whatever comes its way, even if it's a Sludge Wave. It's a Hydro Cannon, so unfortunately it's not very effective. This Ice Beam is going to be able to do neutral damage against the Swampert. And so now out comes Azumarill, and this is pretty much GG because this next Sky Attack is going to determine the match. So that's GG round 2. Very well played. Very good prediction again. Arrohh has very well understood his own team, knowing what his opponent might play against him. So coming into game 6, we're up against Jay Devon, another fellow YouTuber, has very high quality content on his channel. I do recommend that you check it out. So we have Altaria going into Bronzong. This is slightly more favorable for Bronzong, as it can take these Sky Attacks, not very effective. Dragon Breath is not very effective. However, Altaria is very high DPS despite doing not very effective damage, and he decides to shield against the Psyshock that is doing neutral damage. He wants to maintain switch advantage here, so does get off the Sky Attack to finish off this Bronzong, and this Altaria, although is down 1 shield, is at a decent amount of health, so it's going to be very likely to able to get off another Sky Attack. So against Azumarill, it's definitely going to get off the Sky Attack, neutral damage, putting a bit of damage out here. So Azumarill decides to, it looks like, to farm down this Altaria, extra farming their energy. So this next Sky Attack is going to put a bit of shield pressure on this Azumarill, who's just farming perhaps just a little bit too much, a little bit of lag here, but it looks like our friend Jay here is deciding to just go all the way. He's at 100 health, 100 energy, but because these bubbles are not very effective, it probably wasn't the best way to, it's probably not the best Pokemon to farm down in Altaria. So Tropius comes out, and Metachamp counter swaps in. Unfortunately, it's not a counter swap, but it's still better than having the Tropius out there. And we know this Metachamp has no shield. This next Sky Attack is just going to be able to just finish off this Metachamp. And out comes Azumarill. And Azumarill, its move with the lowest energy still costs 65 energy. So it's unable to spam 2 charge move in a row, even though it has a ton of energy. Not the best situation for Jay to be in. So that's GG round 1. Very well played on Arroh's end in game 1. And game 2, we have Lantern against Jay's Lantern. So we have a mirror match here. We're going to see some water gun spamming away, doing not very effective damage, but still a decent amount of damage. So water gun is very high DPS fast move with not very high energy production, but it's able to get off this Thunderbolt. So Arrohh decides not to shield. Jay does have CMP here, meaning charge move priority. He gets off his charge move first, and Lantern goes for, okay, so Jay swaps out his Lantern with a ton of energy in the back, and Arrohh is a bit tricky here, able to get off this Hydro Pump. Jay Devon probably did not expect that, thinking it was a Thunderbolt. So it does take this Metachamp to a very low amount of health, enough for this Skarmory to just farm it down with Air Slash. So at this point, this Skarmory has no need to shield. It's got a Sky Attack ready to go for whatever that comes in, and very likely it's going to be Lantern. So it is Lantern. It does get off the Sky Attack. It's not going to actually finish it off. It's going to take it down to the reds. And this Lantern decides to get off this Thunderbolt. And this Lantern is not going to be very useful anymore, obviously, because it's got just no more energy and very little health. So out comes Skarmory. And against Altaria, normally this is a favorable matchup for Skarmory. But in a match where Altaria has 2 shield, it will beat Skarmory all the time. With 2 shields, it's able to just block these neutral damage Sky Attacks while it's doing not very effective damage, Dragon Breath and Sky Attack. But it's a very high DPS dragon, one of the best in the game. And so you're able to see that it's pretty much GG round 2. Very well played on Arroh's end. So timely swap there into the Flash Cannon, but it's basically rendered useless, and this Altaria is able to get off the Sky Attack to pretty much close to finishing off this round. So GG round game 7.
There's one shot, now the future is yours. Go! Yeah! It's one shot, now the future is yours.